Welcome back, everybody. It's halftime for another version of The Game, and we've had some fun the last few years going back in time. I don't think we can go back further in the time tunnel than the guys we've got right now. They were part of the first game back in 1971. That's right. They've traded salt tablets for ibuprofen, and they go at it hard still. But let's call roll for the Fort Walton Beach side. The captain that kind of put all this together for us, Jerry Sexton. Are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Quarterback Bill Prescott.
Yes, I'm here.
Ricky Whitfield, running back.
I'm here.
And linebacker extraordinaire Jim Rose.
Jim's here.
For the Choctawhatchee side, the captain that put all this together, Bobby Scott, defensive back.
Hey, Tom, I'm here.
Quarterback Morry Burgess.
Yes, I'd love to be here.
Fastest guy around, Bob Stone.
And I'm on with y'all.
And Chuck Franzalia, he's here.
Proud to be here with you.
And last but not least, the coach, frolicking Fred Pitts from the Choctaw Indians. Fred, you're here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Guys, thanks so much for joining us. This is a big time for me, and I know it's a big time for everybody. But we try to explain this to people, what it was like back then. And Bill Prescott, let me turn to you first, because people, I guess it was a different time back then, wasn't it? Way back when we were playing city ball and then up through high school.
Yeah, I was actually just a junior for that game. So Ricky and Jim and Jerry, they all had it was their first and last one for them. But I kind of came into Fort Walton Beach around 8th grade. I don't hardly remember too much before that, because at 9th grade, when Coach Norris started the team, we were a few 9th graders and a few 10th graders playing 12th graders.
Yeah, and back then you had to share schools. We had to share with Choctawhatchee. Ricky Whitfield, it was early mornings and late nights, wasn't it?
Oh, definitely. Leaving home before the sun came up and getting home after the sun had long gone down.
And those first few years, Fort Walton Beach, you played a high school schedule, but it wasn't the big teams. You would play some of the smaller schools. Jim Rose, take us back a little bit to what you guys were trying to build, because no one's done it since you guys did it, and no one will do it forever on. It was kind of a one-time thing.
Yes, it's Jim Rose here, in a very unique situation. We had a chance to bond in our group. We were actually the senior class, if you want to call it that, for 3 years in a row, from 10th, 11th, to 12th grade. And I certainly remember playing the really small schools as we were 9th and 10th graders, trying to form a varsity team. And we played a lot of the small backwoods schools in, North Florida and southern Alabama. And the hardest thing sometimes was for the bus driver to find these schools. They were certainly tucked away. And a lot of these good old boys back there, I think their version of a pregame was, showing up and watching us warm up, and they were drinking out of a brown paper bag, and we didn't even know what that was back then, and we were pretty innocent. But anyway, very unique time, and we're all, I know, all our Viking mates here, we're thrilled to be a part of that and kind of establish a tradition that, I think went a long way for Fort Walton Beach High School.
Yeah, from the Choctaw side, Bobby Scott, you guys were the ones that had the tradition. Choctaw owned Friday nights for a long, long time. Talk about Coach Wyman Townsell and what you guys had over there.
Well, that's what's unique about this whole get-together right now. The Vikings started. They were the foundation for this. So with Bob and Morry and myself and Chuck, we were just another class in a long line of great classes. The year before us with Joe Brunner and Sherman Moon, Rob Spivey. Fred can attest to that. He was there coaching at that time. And then the class behind us was so successful and was so good, too, with Don Vanderhoek, Sean McCowan, Rip Miller. It was just another in line of the tradition that had been established over years. And I did allude to it earlier when you grew up as I played on the Gators, and then St. Mary's, when you were young, all you did was listen to the radio until your dad would take you to a ball game. And at that time, the games were being played, when I was growing up, were being played at Meg Stadium, the Choctaw games. And so that was, just, and I've got to say, Fred's here. Fred and Tom Christie just, their spirit and love for Choctaw football just influenced all of us at a young age, and they just carried on with Wyman and all the other coaches. So it was a great time.
Fred, jump in there from a coach's perspective. Your thoughts on what Choctaw was going through and what was happening across town?
Well, excuse me, Wyman had to kind of let the guys know that this was just not another football game. And I think that because most of the guys everybody knew everybody. They all knew one another. They played together in little leagues, and they moved up together, and now all of a sudden they were going to line up against one another. So Wyman had to kind of put it in perspective for everybody. He was somebody that really could put his finger on the pulse of the game. He actually knew before most games that we were going to win or when we were going to win. He had that uncanny sense. He knew teams, he knew people, and he knew most of all how to make sure his players stayed grounded for the game. And this is one you had to be grounded for, because we walked in that stadium that night, and there was, I think, close to 15,000 people in there and stuffed in there. The track was 8 and 10 deep. It was amazing. And so Wyman had to make sure these guys knew that this was not just another ball game. This was something that would be going on. And here we are talking about it a long time ago. We're talking about it. And Wyman knew that this one was going to go down in history, so he had to keep the guys focused, and he had to let them know that this one really counted. It wasn't just another football game on Friday night.
Bobby, you told me the story about going to a pregame meal and then the bus pulled back in the parking lot and what you saw.
That's true. We ate at Black Angus like we always did on our home meals, and as we came back to the stadium, we were kind of in awe that the parking lots were full, and probably like for Walton Beach players, we had a walkthrough, and games back then were at 8 o'clock instead of 7 today, and so we were walking out on the field at 6 o'clock, and the stadium's full. I guess they had let them in right then or just before, and I remember seeing people eating chicken dinners in the bleachers, and like Fred said, they were already getting 10 deep on the track. You had to walk. It was like a Florida State-Florida game. It was just amazing. And even pregame of warming up, and if you dropped a punt and you were on Fort Walton's sideline, they would roar like it was a real game just in warm-up. So it was spectacular, yeah.
Jerry Sexton, you're with us. That year you were out due to injury, but the enormity of this, talk a little bit about it from the Vikings side, because back then there was no summer league baseball, there was no 7-on-7 passing camps, and this was the first time that Fort Walton Beach played Choctaw in anything.
Well, and you also have to realize this was, we had been listening to, like I worked at the old Holiday Inn with Rip Miller, and I can remember Rip just giving me crap almost every day about how bad Choctaw was going to kill Fort Walton. And, we even had to listen to that stuff from our brothers and sisters and stuff like that went to Choctaw. And, you just kind of, sat there and said, okay, well, let's just wait. And, when you got to the game, I was there several hours before myself, and I was amazed that the place was just packed. You couldn't even get it. You hardly even get into the place. And I was actually on the sidelines, and it was almost like the whole place was, completely full all the way to the sidelines. There were so many people there. And, it was a heck of a game. But the first play, Choctaw went and knocked out Danny Davenport. He was getting smelling salts on the sidelines, and he was our biggest guy. And I think everybody was starting to look around and say, oh, boy, what are we into right now? But as the game went on, we started to play more Fort Walton. I think Fort Walton, was a little bit tight, there at the beginning, and then started to really come on into the second half.
Morry Burgess, you were the quarterback for Choctawhatchee. Tell us a little bit about your memories and the game plan going into that game and some of those things that Fred Pitts was saying about Coach Townsell.
Well, most definitely want to talk about Coach Townsell because, I moved to that area about 1965, and real quickly we knew that program at Choctaw was something to be in awe of. And I remember back in my Longwood house at night with the windows open, and I would hear the roar from the Meg Stadium of the game. So I was by the time I got to junior high, I was pumped up for Choctawhatchee football. And so there was a real awe about the whole program. And I remember when Coach Pitts used to come pick us up at Meg's in those old buses, at the Choctawhatchee buses, and take us over to Choctaw. It was really a life-changing experience for us. Coach Townsville, to me, he really was a formative person in my life. The discipline he used, when he would pull out his hat because someone messed up in practice and set back the schedule he had by the 5 minutes because we messed up. When he put lights on the practice field so we could practice at night, so we could get more time in and better time in. It was just a very disciplined program, and you were always had to be on your toes around him and the other coaches. It was, like I said, a really formative period in my life.
Bill Prescott, on your side of the ball, the paper said that you were 9 of 13. I guess those were video game type numbers back then, lighting it up. Share with us a little bit about the Fort Walton side, because the paper talks about the defensive game plan that Coach Townsville had for Fort Walton's open attack.
I don't remember a whole bunch of the details like these guys do. I guess it's been too long. I always just remember, I think we were tight at first. But one thing I learned from Coach Norris was, I guess I didn't think about winning or losing. It was just execute. Do your best and execute. So your head's in the game, just focusing on that. And I don't remember many plays except I think Billy Nolan, a running back, ran out of bounds and went flying into the crowd 3 feet away from the line and came back in there saying, "Hey, this is really fun." So everybody got a good kick, and off we went. But honestly, I don't remember a whole bunch from it. And, Coach Norris, he didn't let us throw a whole lot. He liked us to sprint out and get out of the pressure and get out there. And I just always had the hardest time wanting to throw it and not stick it down and run it. So he was always getting on me about, well, pull it down and run it. But so we never threw a whole bunch, but it was a great time.
Chuck Franzalia, you and I were talking the other night. What's unique about that first game, I don't know if you guys remember this. I don't think there was an away team because both teams wore their darks that night, didn't they, Chuck?
That's correct. It's a funny thing. Coach Townsville had the only team in the state that kicked off at 8 o'clock. And also we set up on the opposite the press box. That was our home side of the field. And I remember him mumbling, people didn't like the 8 o'clock start, and why are we over on the small visitor side? But basically, Coach Townsville would say what he thought, because he was there from the inception for the stadium, and he said, well, I built this stadium, and we'll start the game when I say, and we'll sit on the side of the stands, that I want to do. But it was spectacular. It was awesome. There's not enough added adjectives, I think, to explain. It was the largest attendance and excitement and hype event in Fort Walton Beach, probably to this date. I mean, like Coach Pitts said, there's 15,000 people. But if you ask around town, about 40,000 people will tell you they were there. So and to expand on the one thing that Coach Pitts said is, I was team manager. I had pretty much access to everything, and I'd hear different things. And early on, probably at the end of the last year when the schedule was being made, I think Coach Townsville was ambivalent about playing the game. Early on, he thought it was too early. Those kids played against each other. A lot of them were on the same team, and he wanted to wait a couple of years to get it going. But once Max Bruner, who was the last say, said that game would be played, then Wyman Townsville was all in, and he had coaches meetings, and I'm sure he told John Melton, Sid Neighbors, Tom Freeman, Coach Pitts, Coach Christie, okay, we're all in on this. This is going to be a big thing, and we really need to, put our all into it, because it's going to be the first game of many, many to come.
When we got on the call, Bob Stone, before we said, I'm here, somebody had to keep up with Randy Carter. He scored the only touchdown. Bob, talk about that. Talk about what an athlete he was and how that night was for you.
Well, actually, there was a series of athletes on that field. Randy Carter was probably the premier athlete on the field. He certainly had proven his point in not only speed, but in size and skill and everything else. But when you look across the field in those things and how many of those kids played each other all the way up as they were growing up, it was, I guess, one of the unique things about it is everybody knew who the players were. Okay, so it was a real experience just to get out there. One other thing that I had noted. Anybody that plays high school football, that's a time of year and time of life that you'll always remember because you develop lifelong friendships. But when you have an opportunity to play in the first of something like we did in this particular game, that just highlights and adds to a memory that just not everybody has the chance to get. So I thought that was a really unique part of our experience growing up.
Now, Tom, this is Rick. Wasn't there another touchdown scored in that game?
Is that Ricky?
a nice little segue into Ricky Whitfield, who I think was heading toward the north end zone, took it in, and then something happened. So I'll let you talk about that, Rick.
Oh, well, you just, said there was one touchdown scored. I just had to say something about that. No, I think my biggest memory is watching the game film after the game and seeing the referee doing exactly what he's supposed to do and looking to make sure I didn't step out of bounds. But he saw somebody fall on his back through the corner of his eye, so he just threw a flag over in that direction. He never turned his head and looked.
Yeah, the game that had a little bit of controversy to it with that. Bobby Scott, you were one of the defensive backs. What about your take on that?
Slightly different take, right?
No. I was one of those I actually wasn't on my back. I was on my belly. What's funny is I still remember, and for years I talked with Kenny Hayden about it because as Ricky was running parallel to the line of scrimmage, I'm at safety. Bob Stone's coming up from his left cornerback, and I can see it like today. Ricky turns up the sidelines, and Tim, who we had all played city ball together and junior high together. Like I said, I knew him for years. After that, we discussed it. He threw at me. I had turned my back to him, and he legitimately clipped me. And what happened is I go down and knock Bob down. We're both laying on the ground. Ricky probably doesn't remember this, but everybody gets a hold of the film. Bob and I were reaching out trying to grab Rick. We both jump up thinking Bob thought he got clipped. It was me that clipped him. And actually, I did get clipped, jumped up, and I saw the flag, and I thought, good, they got it. They got the right call. And then the controversy came out that was not the call that the referee threw the flag on. So whether or not Bob and I would have brought Ricky down, that's only one person knows that. But it sure provided a lot of drama and a lot of talk for many years. It was amazing. It truly was.
Yeah, it was fourth quarter. Choctawhatchee's up 12-7. The Vikings are driving. They get down there, and then they score the touchdown, which comes back. And you guys mentioned the game film. Choctawhatchee's game film was burned up in the fire to the field house. And Fort Walton Beach, I went over there maybe 10 years ago to get some game films from year 2 and year 3 and asked for year 1, and no one knows where it is.
I might have it. This is Bill. I might have it. I think my mom for a gift for us took them and made DVDs. I might have something hanging around.
Hey, Bill, if you don't, Bobby Scott might.
Oh, okay. Well, the price just went down if he's got one too.
That'd be something to bring out on the 50th anniversary.
Jim Rose, your thoughts? You were the linebacker for Fort Walton Beach High School, team captain, also all sports winner for the Scholastic Award. But let's go back over to you guys and your thoughts on not just that play, but that whole night.
Well, it was a huge night, like everybody keeps saying. And one thing I would like to comment on is, it's just a great game on both sides. I think, the Choctawhatchee side and Coach Townsville, they had a tremendous program, that we in the Fort Walton Beach side were trying to, emulate eventually. And our faculty and Coach Norris and the group, they really did a great job in preparing us. So a lot came together, and I think as a group we pulled it off. It was a tremendous game, well played, well coached, and I think everybody's walked away as a tremendous experience, especially if you step back and look at kind of the time period we were in. There were a lot of big social events going on at that time, but we just were kind of didn't get caught up in all that stuff, and we just were football players trying to do the best we can, and we played a great game, and it was a little bit overwhelming, I thought, for a lot of us. I mean, from playing these really small schools for the first couple of years, and then we step into the, what was the big stage, and one big memory I have is just driving to the stadium. We were in our bus, and we actually had a police escort to get us through all the cars, and so we were all wide-eyed going, wow, look at all this, it was pretty bizarre, and Choctaw got ahead of us in the first half, but for us as a bunch of rookies, to keep our composure and make a good game of it, I thought was good. But as a defensive guy, I don't remember any big plays on my part for sure. I just remember, being in the trenches in Choctaw, and Coach Townsend just came at us, and it was 3 or 4 yards in a cloud of dust, and we just were doing our best to hang on and slow down their machine. But they really came at us, and I tip my hat to them and everybody for that matter that had to be such a well played and well coached game. It was a great experience.
When the game ended, Morry Burgess, what do you remember about post-game as far as the elation and shaking hands and just the, like we've said it a number of times, the massive humanity in what at the time was Memorial Stadium?
Yeah, that was it was really a moment where I was still a bit shaky, I'm sure. I think, as I remember, we ended the game running a lot of quarterback sneaks because we have to take our hat off, and I think we really felt like Fort Walton Beach played a tremendous game. Take our hat off to them. It was a tough team, and we ended up just trying to stay in the game. As I remember, like I said, a lot of quarterback sneaks, and just 2 or 3 yards at a time. And I really felt like we were fortunate to get away from that game with a win. I think we probably went in with a little bit more bravado than we left with. I was relieved, I think, that was behind us. That was a game where, as has been said before, we played with these guys. Danny Davenport and Paul were on my junior high team. We knew them well. We respected them. And I think we had a lot of respect for the Fort Walton Beach team because we knew them, and we knew that they were good athletes. And so it was good to see that one in my rearview mirror, I thought.
And, Jerry, this night not only set the foundation for future Fort Walton Choctaw football games, but for all events, because from this point forward, the first time Choctaw and Fort Walton played in basketball, kind of the same thing. If you weren't there an hour and a half early, you didn't get a seat.
Yeah, and, the rivalry is really pretty big because, so many of us do know each other. I mean, my old roommate in college, Eddie Davis, 5 years ago, I was in Atlanta, and I remember being in his basement, and we're listening to a webcast of the game going on. And, we're basically sitting there. Luckily, Fort Walton won that game, but so I had bragging rights. But, it's basically, it's still watched today, and people still follow what's going on. And, we still have that rivalry between Choctaw and Fort Walton.
Coach Fred Pitts, I'm going to ask you to kind of give us your final thoughts from your side as the Choctawhatchee coach in the group here.
Well, I want to say this and echo just what was said. The magnitude of the game was unbelievable, but because there could have been a lot of problems with it, there wasn't. After the game, the teams showed great respect for one another. In fact, all the fans did too, even though there was a slight, as you said, bit of controversy there at the end. everybody came out of that thing with their heads held high, and the fans showed respect for the teams, and the teams showed respect for each other. And it was just a great feeling to know that you could have a rivalry like this going on and nothing other than good sportsmanship coming out of it. And that said a lot for the coaches, Fort Walton coaches and Choctaw coaches, and for the kids themselves, even though, there could have been maybe problems, and there weren't. A stadium full of people, rabid fans on both sides, and it was just a great feeling to know that you could walk away from that game, and everybody the next day would say, "Boy, whoa, what a great game!" And like Chuck said, probably 40,000 people in Fort Walton today were at that game, they say. But I still want to say that it was a credit to both teams and to all the fans that they showed the great sportsmanship that they showed after that game, even though, like I said, small controversy. But everybody walked away from that game. And I'm not so sure that Fort Walton didn't win that game. The score said they didn't. But it gives them something to talk about. And it's something that they can say, hey, the first game we held our own with Choctaw. They were the big guns, and we were the little guys, and we held our own, and they sure did.
Well, for the record, Choctaw won the game 12-7, started a series that is basically, you couldn't get much more even than it is. The average score is 18-17. Fort Walton plays it in their own stadium. A couple of years ago, Gary Hines suggested a fundraiser. We would have a flag football game with all us guys, but I'm thinking more like Bobby Scott. We make some copies of that DVD and sell it. I think we can really make some money.
My knees would appreciate that better.
Gentlemen, thanks so much for doing this. It's great to catch up with you. Jerry Sexton from Fort Walton, thanks for gathering the guys, and Bobby Scott, to you on the Choctaw side. It's been a great time and one that I'll never forget. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you.